power, influence, wealth beyond imagination. But what happens when the richest person in the room isn't recognized? When the owner of the very ground you stand on is mistaken for someone beneath you? This is the story of Maya Sinclair, a billionaire who didn't need to flaunt her wealth. But when disrespect came knocking, she had the ultimate power move waiting in silence. And trust me, you do not want to miss what happens in this one. But before we dive deep into this jaw-dropping moment, make sure to hit that subscribe button because stories like this, you won't find them anywhere else. The air was thick with luxury. A gleaming private jet sat waiting on the runway, engines humming, crew members in pristine uniforms standing in line, greeting the elite passengers, business moguls, celebrities, heirs to old money fortunes. Everyone who boarded this plane had a name that carried weight. And then, there was Maya Sinclair. She stepped out of a sleek, black Rolls-Royce, dressed casually in designer athleisure, classy, understated, yet effortlessly powerful. But there was just one problem. No one knew who she was. To the untrained eye, she didn't look like a billionaire. No security entourage. No assistant holding 10 bags. Just a woman walking onto a plane like she belonged because, well, she did. More than anyone else, in fact. Because, unknown to the flight crew, this wasn't just another rich passenger. Maya owned this plane. She owned the fleet. She owned the entire luxury airline. But sometimes, the most powerful people prefer silence over spectacle. And that's where our problem begins. Because standing at the cabin entrance, clipboard in hand, scanning passengers with a sharp, calculating gaze, was Samantha Carter, head flight attendant, strict, experienced, but also terribly judgmental. Samantha had a special talent, the ability to instantly decide who was important and who wasn't. She greeted an old money heir with a dazzling, "Welcome aboard, Mr. Kensington." She practically bowed when a Hollywood director walked past. But when Maya approached, that enthusiasm faded instantly. No warm greeting, no polite nod, just a flick of the eyes up and down, as if scanning for a reason to care. And in that moment, Samantha had already decided Maya was not worth her time. The billionaire could sense it, that quiet dismissal, that invisible ranking system that determined who deserved a smile and who got a half-hearted grunt. But Maya? She had played this game before, and she knew exactly how to win without saying a single word. Maya stepped forward and smiled, handing over her boarding pass. Samantha barely glanced at it before replying with an impatient, "Economy seating is through the back." Pause. Silence. A blink. For a second, Maya almost laughed. Economy? On a private jet? The woman didn't even know what she was saying. But Maya didn't correct her. She just watched, waited, let the mistake breathe. Samantha, still oblivious, waved her off dismissively. Stay clear of the first-class cabin unless you're assisting someone. Assisting someone? Oh, Samantha, if only you knew. Maya didn't argue. She didn't boast. She didn't flex her wealth. Because true power never needs to scream. It just watches and waits for the right moment to strike. So, with nothing but a knowing smile, Maya walked past the stunned flight attendant and took her seat. Not in the back. Not in some cramped corner. No. She sat in the most luxurious seat on the plane. Her seat. The owner's seat. And at that moment, Samantha should have realized, but she didn't. Not yet. But oh, trust me, that revelation, it's coming. And when it hits, it's going to shake this flight at 30,000 feet. Because little did Samantha know, she was about to make the biggest mistake of her career. But wait, if you think that was bad, just wait until you see what happens next. Because one mistake, that could have been forgiven. But when Samantha takes things too far, when she makes the ultimate mistake, it won't just cost her job, it will cost her everything. So if you're ready for the moment where power reveals itself in the most unforgettable way, Hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready for the most interesting parts of this story. Power is an interesting thing. Some people carry it like a shield, making sure the world knows exactly who they are. Others, they wield it in silence, watching how the world reacts before they make their move. And today, Maya Sinclair was watching. Closely. She sat comfortably in her seat, stretching out with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you belong. But the thing about power, it makes people nervous, especially the ones who think they have it but don't. And for Samantha Carter, head flight attendant, Maya was already a problem. Samantha moved to the cabin with purpose, adjusting glasses, smoothing out linens, greeting passengers with a voice laced with respect, but only for the right people. A wealthy hedge fund manager? He got a warm, "Can I get you anything, mister?" Harding? A well-known actress? A dazzling, "It's an honor to have you flying with us, Miss Rowe." But when Maya requested a drink, Samantha barely looked up. "That's for first-class guests," she said flatly. No smile, no explanation, just a quick dismissal, as if Maya had asked for something absurd. The billionaire tilted her head slightly, watching the interaction play out like a scene from a movie she'd already seen before. She could feel the quiet judgment dripping from every word. She could hear the unspoken assumptions. She must be someone's assistant, maybe a girlfriend tagging along. Definitely not a VIP. Maya didn't react. She didn't argue. She just leaned back and let the moment hang in the air. And then, just seconds later, the real punchline arrived. Because right behind her, that same hedge fund manager, Mr. Harding, flagged Samantha down with a casual flick of his wrist. "I'll have a glass of that 97 Bordeaux." And just like that, Samantha's entire demeanor shifted. Her face lit up. Her voice turned warm and accommodating. "Of course, Mr. Harding. Right away." Maya watched as Samantha walked off, wine in hand, delivering it with the kind of attentiveness that screamed, "This is a man who matters." And Maya just smiled to herself, because moments like this, they were priceless. Not because they were new, oh no, she had seen this happen too many times before, but because they revealed everything. Power isn't about money, it's about perception. And right now, Samantha had no idea she was misjudging the most powerful person on this plane. Samantha returned, still oblivious, still convinced she was in control of the dynamic. "Would you like some water?" she asked Maya, as if offering a favor. Maya simply met her eyes, her expression unreadable. She could have said something, could have put Samantha in her place right then and there. But what's the fun in that? Because true power waits, watches, and strikes at the perfect moment. And Maya? She was just getting started. Some people walk through life completely unaware of the storm they're creating, blind to the mistakes they're making, the bridges they're burning, the power they're disrespecting. And right now, at 30,000 feet, Samantha Carter was doing just that. Maya Sinclair sat in her seat, calm, composed, completely unbothered. But make no mistake, she was taking notes. Because power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just watches and waits for the perfect moment to strike. Samantha, meanwhile, was still busy convincing herself she was in control. She moved through the cabin, enforcing her own unspoken hierarchy, making sure the right people were comfortable, while subtly reminding Maya that in her eyes, she didn't belong. And then, Samantha made her next mistake. Maya, reviewing documents on her tablet, shifted slightly in her seat, adjusting for comfort. It was a simple movement, something no one else would have noticed. But to Samantha, it was an opportunity. "Ma'am, I need you to stay in your assigned area," she said, her voice clipped, her patience wearing thin. Maya looked up, slow, deliberate, eyes locking onto Samantha's with a quiet intensity. "I am in my assigned area." There was no aggression, no attitude, just a statement of fact. But somehow, that made it even more powerful. Samantha blinked, hesitating for half a second, half a second too long. Then, instead of backing down, she doubled down. I just need you to follow instructions, all right? Maya tilted her head, a small smirk appearing at the edge of her lips. Because this was funny. She had met people like Samantha before. People who wore authority, like a costume, mistaking temporary control for real power. But real power isn't loud. Real power doesn't need to prove itself. Real power waits. And Maya? She had all the time in the world. But Samantha wasn't finished. A few minutes later, Maya made a simple request, a second glass of wine. A reasonable request. A normal request. But in Samantha's mind, it was an opportunity to remind Maya of her place. I've already told you, she said, sighing dramatically. First-class service is for priority guests. This time, the entire cabin went quiet. Maya set down her tablet and slowly looked up. Not a single muscle in her face moved, but there was something in her expression, something subtle, something dangerous. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed Samantha's face. Maya leaned forward just slightly. Priority guests? She repeated, her voice smooth, controlled. Samantha swallowed, straightened her posture, and held her ground. Yes, first-class passengers who have elite status with the airline. Maya nodded, slowly, thoughtfully, as if processing the information. Then, after a pause, she simply said, Interesting. No argument. No demand. No raised voice. Just that one word, wrapped in quiet amusement. Samantha had no idea what it meant. No idea that, in that moment, she had just walked straight into a disaster of her own making. Because power? Power doesn't need to fight. It doesn't need to push. It simply waits. And Maya Sinclair? She was done waiting. Some mistakes can be corrected. Others, they seal your fate the moment they happen. And Samantha Carter? She was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. The plane cruised smoothly at 30,000 feet. The hum of the engines filled the cabin. Passengers relaxed in their luxury seats, sipping champagne, scrolling through their phones, blissfully unaware that the most dramatic moment of this flight was about to unfold. But Maya Sinclair? She knew. She felt it. That shift in the air, the moment before the storm hits. And she was ready. Samantha, still blinded by her own arrogance, strutted down the aisle, keeping a watchful eye on Maya as if she were a problem that needed to be contained. The woman was obsessed with control, desperate to maintain a sense of authority that, unbeknownst to her, had already been stripped away. And then the moment arrived. A light turbulence warning flashed on the screen, a gentle reminder for passengers to remain seated. Most barely noticed. But Samantha? She saw it as another excuse to exert her dominance. She marched straight to Maya's seat, her tone sharper than before. Ma'am, put everything away and sit back properly. We're experiencing turbulence. Maya, relaxed, barely glancing up from her tablet, responded in that same calm, measured tone. I know how turbulence works. I'm fine. That should have been the end of it. That should have been the moment Samantha let it go. But arrogance is a dangerous thing. It makes people reckless. And Samantha? She was about to cross a line that should never be crossed. I don't think you understand, Samantha snapped, her voice loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. You need to listen when you're given instructions. And then, she did the unthinkable. In a moment of pure frustration, Samantha raised her hand, fast, impulsive, and slapped Maya Sinclair across the face. The sound cracked through the cabin like thunder. Silence. Passengers froze. The air itself seemed to stop moving. A stunned hush fell over the cabin as every single person processed what had just happened. The hedge fund manager lowered his glass. The Hollywood actress gasped, eyes wide. Even the co-pilot, peeking through the curtain, paled at the sight. Samantha's own face drained of color as the reality of what she'd just done settled in. She had crossed a boundary that couldn't be undone. She had made the ultimate mistake. Because the woman she had just slapped, She owned this plane. And Maya, she wasn't just going to let this slide. Without a single word, without a single hint of emotion, Maya reached for her phone. Not in panic, not in distress, but with the steady, controlled movement of someone who knew exactly what to do next. She dialed a number, a pause, and then, in a voice so calm it was terrifying, she said 6 simple words. "Get my legal team on standby." Samantha staggered back, her breathing quick, her mind racing. Passengers exchanged glances, murmurs breaking through the silence. The co-pilot whispered something urgently to the pilot. And then, finally, one of the younger flight attendants, eyes wide with horror, stepped forward and muttered under her breath, "Do you even know who she is?" Samantha's mouth opened, then closed. The panic in her eyes was undeniable. And Maya? She just sat there, still, composed, watching as realization finally crashed over the woman like a tidal wave. Because the tables had just turned. And now, the real game was about to begin. Some mistakes can be covered up. Some can be apologized for. But this was irreversible. The moment Samantha Carter's hand connected with Maya Sinclair's face, her fate was sealed. And now, she was about to realize just how badly she had messed up. The silence in the cabin was deafening. Passengers sat frozen, eyes darting between Maya and Samantha, waiting, breath held, for what would happen next. The pilot had been alerted, the co-pilot whispering frantically in his ear. But it wasn't until Maya Sinclair made that one phone call, just 6 words, that the weight of the situation truly hit. "Get my legal team on standby." That was it. No shouting, no threats, no outburst, just cold, controlled precision. The kind of response that only came from someone who knew they had already won. Samantha's face drained of color. Her hands trembled. The confidence, the arrogance, the false sense of control, gone. Swallowed by panic. The co-pilot rushed forward, tablet in hand, his face a shade paler than before. He didn't address Maya. He didn't dare. Instead, he turned the screen toward the captain, whispering urgently, "That's her. That's her." The captain looked down, and for a second, his breath hitched. There, staring back from the screen, was Maya Sinclair's profile. CEO, billionaire, aviation mogul, owner of the very aircraft they were flying on. And that's when the unraveling began. The co-pilot turned to Samantha, his voice barely above a whisper. "You just slapped the woman who owns this plane." Samantha stumbled backward, eyes wide, hands gripping the seat in front of her for balance. "What? No! No! That can't be." Her voice cracked, frantic, her mind scrambling for some way out. Some excuse, some explanation. But there was none. Maya didn't move, didn't blink, just watched, silent, unshaken. And that silence, that was worse than any reaction Samantha had imagined. Passengers began murmuring. The hedge fund manager, once smug and dismissive, now looked deeply uncomfortable. The Hollywood actress shifted in her seat, suddenly aware of how drastically the power dynamic had changed. Then, finally, Maya spoke. "You're fired." 2 words. That's all it took. Samantha's mouth opened, then closed. She looked to the captain, to the co-pilot, to the other flight attendants, searching for anyone to intervene. But no one did. No one could. Because when a billionaire fires you on her own plane, there's no appeal, no second chance, no argument. The reality hit Samantha like a freight train. Her career, over. Her reputation, destroyed. Every elite airline in the industry, they'd hear about this before she even stepped off the aircraft. And Maya, she didn't have to do anything else. The damage had already been done. Samantha stumbled back, barely managing to stay on her feet. I didn't know. I thought." Maya just raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. "You thought what?" Samantha swallowed hard. "I didn't know who you were. And Maya leaned forward just slightly, her voice softer now, but somehow even more powerful. You shouldn't have to. And that was the moment Samantha realized. This was never just about money, never just about power. It was about respect, the kind that should be given to everyone, regardless of who they are or what they look like. And now, it was too late for her to change anything. The plane continued its steady course, but for Samantha Carter, this flight, this career, had just reached its final destination. The air inside the cabin was thick, tense, suffocating. Samantha Carter, the woman who had spent the entire flight commanding authority, was now standing frozen, her world crumbling in real time. The murmurs of passengers grew louder, the weight of 1,000 unspoken judgments pressing down on her shoulders. But the only voice that mattered, the only person in the room with the power to change everything, Maya Sinclair, and she hadn't even raised her voice. Maya sat there, calm, composed, watching Samantha with the kind of silence that didn't just make a person nervous, it made them unravel. The pilot, now fully aware of the catastrophe unfolding in his cabin, stepped forward carefully. "Ms. Sinclair, I deeply apologize for." Maya didn't even glance at him. "I'm not interested in apologies," she said, voice smooth as silk, laced with quiet authority. "I'm interested in solutions." The co-pilot swallowed hard, gripping his tablet like it could somehow protect him from the storm brewing in front of him. What would you like us to do, ma'am?" Maya turned her gaze back to Samantha, and for the first time, Samantha felt it. The shift. The undeniable realization that she was no longer in control. That every ounce of power she thought she had just been stripped away. "You're fired," Maya said again, slow, deliberate, leaving no room for argument. Samantha's breath hitched. "Please, Ms. Sinclair, I didn't mean." "You meant exactly what you did," Maya interrupted, her voice unwavering. "You meant the disrespect. You meant the dismissal. You meant every moment of judgment you threw my way. What you didn't mean was to do it to the wrong person." Asterisk. A nervous chuckle escaped from the hedge fund manager a few seats away. He quickly looked down when Maya's eyes flicked in his direction. "Escort her off the plane when we land," Maya instructed the captain, who nodded stiffly. "Wait!" Samantha's voice cracked. "Ms. Sinclair, I swear I..." Maya leaned in just slightly, her eyes locked onto Samantha's. "What do you think was going to happen?" she asked. "Did you think no one would notice? Did you think you could treat me like I was beneath you, and there would be no consequences?" Samantha stammered. I thought..." "That's the problem," Maya said, cutting her off. "You thought you had power. But real power? It doesn't need to prove itself. Real power sits back and watches people like you destroy themselves." Asterisk. Samantha had no words, no defense, no lifeline to grab onto. The weight of what she had done was pressing down on her like a landslide, and there was no way out. The younger flight attendants, silent up until now, exchanged nervous glances. They had seen Samantha do this before. Dismiss passengers she deemed unworthy. Offer warmth only to the people she believed deserved it. But this time, she had played the game with the wrong person. The captain cleared his throat. "Ms. Sinclair, we'll handle everything immediately upon landing." Maya nodded once, as if it was already decided, because, in reality, it was. Samantha, shaking, looked around the cabin one last time, her eyes darting from one set of staring passengers to the next. The same people she had ignored, dismissed, treated as background noise. Now, they were watching her downfall like a slow-motion train wreck. Her career, over. Her reputation, destroyed. And Maya Sinclair, she didn't even need to raise her voice. Because real power doesn't scream. It just ends things. The wheels touched down, the plane rolling to a smooth stop, but for Samantha Carter, this was no ordinary landing. This wasn't the end of a flight. It was the end of everything. The doors hadn't even opened yet, and already, the weight of her mistake sat heavy in the air. She could feel it in the way the passengers avoided her gaze, in the quiet whispers between the younger flight attendants, in the way the co-pilot refused to even look in her direction. She wasn't just another crew member anymore. She was a cautionary tale. The moment the doors unlocked, 2 uniformed security personnel stepped inside. They didn't need an explanation. They had already been briefed. One of them gestured toward Samantha. "Ma'am, please come with us." Samantha's breath hitched. "Wait, please. I can explain." "There's nothing to explain," Maya said, standing now, stretching her arms like someone who had just finished a long, predictable game. "You disrespected a passenger. You assaulted the owner of this aircraft. You embarrassed yourself. Now, you're facing the consequences." Samantha turned wildly toward the pilot, then the co-pilot, then the passengers she had spent the entire flight catering to, searching for anyone, to step in. But no one did, because no one could. The hedge fund manager, once smug and dismissive, now looked deeply uncomfortable. The Hollywood actress, who had been watching from her seat, simply shook her head and sipped her champagne. And the other flight attendants? They stayed quiet, stiff, because they knew this could have been any of them. "Ms. Sinclair." Samantha tried one last time, voice shaking. "Please, don't ruin my career." Maya turned, looking at her for a long moment, as if considering it. Then she smiled. Not cruel, not vengeful, just knowing. "I don't need to ruin your career," she said, stepping past Samantha, walking toward the exit with the effortless confidence of someone who had never lost a battle in her life. "You did that yourself." And with that, she was gone. Samantha stood there, frozen, watching as Maya disappeared down the stairs of the private jet, stepping into a sleek, waiting car, not looking back. Because why would she? Maya Sinclair had already won. The security officers gestured again. "Ma'am!" And finally, Samantha moved as she stepped off the plane, past the passengers who had witnessed her greatest mistake, past the crew who wouldn't dare speak up for her, past the industry that would never look at her the same way again. She realized something. Maya Sinclair never had to say who she was. She never had to demand respect. She never had to prove her worth. Because true power, it doesn't force itself into the room. It owns the room. And Samantha Carter had learned that lesson the hardest way possible. The world moves fast, but a scandal moves even faster. By the time Maya Sinclair's feet touched the pavement outside the private jet terminal, the story had already begun to spread. A billionaire, disrespected and assaulted on her own aircraft. A flight attendant, blinded by arrogance, fired on the spot. And the industry was watching. Maya didn't need to post a statement. She didn't need to do interviews. She didn't have to lift a single finger, because the world was already talking. News outlets picked it up within hours. Social media erupted. Comments poured in. "This is why you treat everyone with respect." Imagine losing your career in under 5 minutes. Maya Sinclair just gave the most legendary silent power move of all time. But for Maya, this wasn't about headlines. This wasn't about making an example out of Samantha Carter. This was about something bigger. Because here's the thing about power. Real power doesn't just punish. It changes things. And Maya? She was about to change the industry forever. Within days, a new initiative was announced, Equal Skies, a program designed to enforce diversity and bias training in aviation. A program that would teach flight attendants, pilots, and crew members one simple truth. You never know who you're serving. And it wasn't just talk. Airlines lined up, eager to be part of it, knowing that in a world where reputations could be destroyed in an instant, respect wasn't just a moral duty. It was a survival skill. Maya had taken a moment of personal disrespect and turned it into a movement, because that's what real power does. It doesn't just react. It builds. It creates. It reshapes the world in its image. As for Samantha Carter, she disappeared from the industry, her name quietly erased from the aviation world. No airline wanted the bad press. No luxury flight service wanted to be associated with her mistake. She had once been the one who judged passengers, deciding who was worthy of kindness. Now, she was the one being judged. But the irony, the most poetic twist of all, years later, when the scandal had faded and time had dulled the sting, Samantha found herself looking for a way back in. And the only program that would even consider her application? Equal Skies, the very initiative created by the woman she had disrespected. Samantha hesitated before submitting her name, fingers hovering over the keyboard, knowing that Maya Sinclair would see it. Would she approve it? Would she even acknowledge it? Or would she let Samantha's own past mistakes keep her grounded forever? The screen flickered, the cursor blinked, and as Samantha took a deep breath and pressed send, one thought echoed in her mind. Respect is free, but the cost of disrespect? It can last a lifetime. Time has a way of humbling people, of taking those who once stood tall in arrogance and forcing them to kneel before the very lessons they refused to learn. And Samantha Carter? She had learned the hard way. For years, her name had been untouchable in the worst way. No airline would hire her. No elite flight service would take the risk. One mistake, one moment of unchecked arrogance had cost her everything. And no matter how much time passed, the internet never forgets. She tried different industries, different careers, but the stain on her reputation followed her like a shadow. Once, she had ruled the aisles of private jets, treating people based on her own flawed sense of hierarchy. Now, she was on the other side, searching, applying, hoping, and then one day, she saw it, a familiar name, a program designed to give people second chances. Equal Skies, the very initiative started by the woman she had disrespected. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Could she really do this? Could she really submit her name to the same person who had fired her? The same woman she had once looked down on? She hesitated. What if Maya rejected her? What if this was just another door slammed in her face? But then, another thought crept in. What if Maya had built this program not just for others, but for people like her? For people who had been blind, who had made mistakes, who had been forced to learn that power wasn't about who you thought mattered, but about treating everyone like they did. With a deep breath, she typed in her name, reviewed the application, and pressed send. On the other end, somewhere in a sleek corporate office, Maya Sinclair would see it. Would she approve it? Would she acknowledge it? Would she give Samantha the second chance she had never given Maya? Or was this the final price of her mistake? That answer? We may never know. But what we do know is this. Samantha Carter finally understood the lesson she had ignored for so long. Respect isn't just about knowing who someone is. It's about treating everyone like they could be someone. Because in the end, you never know who you're serving. And if you love stories like this, stories that make you think, question, and see the world differently, then you already know what to do. Hit that subscribe button